Guten Tag. Katrin, vielen Dank.
Hello.
Katrin, hast du das
Thank you so much.
dass alle irgendwie 50 Meter weit weg sitzen oder so?
So everyone is 50 meters seated away, which has been organized. Okay, I'm sorry it was not planned this way. I hope that you can all hear me. Can you also read what you see on the screen? I see thumbs up. Thank you so much, because in the next half an hour, and I have to hurry up, you will have to look very closely, because together we are going to look at some technologies of how to dismantle disinformation. My name is Stefan Voß. I'm glad that you're all here. I work at the DPA, the Deutsche Presseagentur in Berlin, in my 25th year. I have been a correspondent abroad in Kiev and Ukraine, and then in Moscow, in Russia, in a leading function in politics at DPA in Berlin is 2017, and the leading of verification. We talk about user-generated content, what people spread on social media. I have a team of experts that I have built up. We have a big fact checks teams, and I'm also a social media trainer, and this is my function today. And I want to show you a few things about that. Just very briefly, what's the definition, for example, on tracking madness? For example, our DPA deals with fact checks against disinformation. The fact checks, it's a new format in journalism and in DPA roughly 10 years ago. We've started about that, and very intensely we dealt with this the last 5 years. The fact check is not only what we send out and we check that, but fact checks, it's a checks of assumptions. If someone in social media or in the public, for example, they say something which is meant to be a fact, and we journalists have to check it, whether this is really true, whether it can be verified, whether that's true or not. We've seen in Germany, mainly to the spread of information in social media, we have an enormous upswing of disinformation. And what is disinformation? Disinformation, it's mistakes and lies that are spread, but it's also very clearly disinformation campaigns, clearly structured disinformation campaigns. At DPA, we are convinced that these disinformation, for example, cannot be get rid of by simply deleting them. Many platforms simply delete them, and we believe that also in the open discourse, that's wrong. We need this discourse, and we need counter speech for that. What does counter speech mean? That we try to verify them through fact checks, whether it's really true what's spread and disseminated. And this is what we are going to look at in the following. What are we going to do in the DPA and the fact check team? What do we do? Then a big block of quick help tools for dismantling fake news, and a third small module, Fact Check 22, our training project for many German media companies in the cooperation with the Google News Initiative. And I'm going to talk about that. I mean, you definitely know about the crazy uncle. I don't know whether you have the crazy uncle or the crazy aunt who is informing you in the WhatsApp groups in the past 2 years in the corona pandemic, for example. They have outed themselves. There are theses like, for example, that the vaccination is dangerous for your life, for example, or that the victims in the war of aggression of Russia, that they are all actors, for example, the victims. You all know what I talk about. The problem is that many of these irrational theses, for example, very often are hard to counteract and contradict. Some are very confusing, some have a little bit, a grain of truth in them, and very few of us really know how to counter them. And we need fact checks, we need materials, and we need more material to counteract them. And this is what we want to do with our fact check at DPA, because otherwise the crazy uncle says, oh, I mean, yeah, I haven't talked about it. I mean, traditional media are not talking about this scandal or something like that. That's why it's so important that we take up these topics. What's the DPA? In brief, we are one of the leading independent international news agency. DPA does not receive any state subsidies. When I started in 1998 at DPA in Kiev. I knew that very well. Today, it's even more important to say, like if someone says that we are state-financed as a media, no, we in DPA, we have not even a broadcasting council, so we have zero funding. Our owners are more than 170 media companies in Germany. We are completely independent of the state. We are completely private. That's also very important to know in all this discussions around the fact checks and the fight against disinformation. Now, let's have a look at our team of DPA, for example. We said against facts and lies, that's the fact. Check news of a DPA, for example, some information. Perhaps here you can see it better. 30 fact checkers at DPA are working at the moment. It's one of the biggest fact checkers teams in Europe and probably also globally. We are in the top 10. It's many of us. The DPA produces fact checks in 6 European countries. We do it in German, Dutch, and French. Until now, we have, and also I counted in the weekend, we have this incredible number of 4,500 fact checks that we have published, and around them, roughly 2,000 were individual fact checks about COVID-19, and in 2,000 cases, we dismantled fake news concerning corona, everything around corona, pandemic, vaccination, etc., and also roughly around 200 fact checks that we have published concerning the war in Ukraine. We cooperate with Facebook, WhatsApp, TikTok, and Google. Why does a DPA do that? Because we want to make sure that due to our fact checks, the massive dissemination of fake news through the algorithms in the social networks and the platforms, that this is going to be limited. And as fact checkers, we are sort of journalistic experts, so to say, that try to make sure with our analysis that this is wrong, and then the reach is going to be limited. We are against simply deleting fake news, and we are never going to check any opinions, for example. It's not the corona politics of the regional government or this or that. We are never going to check that. There is nothing to check about. We only check about the facts that are disseminated, and I'm going to show that. We are certified in the International Fact-Checking Network, and we are proud of them. The IFCN is the global non-plus-ultra of the fact-check scene in Germany. There is still we still have corrective, and AFP Deutsch is also certified, and they work as a fact checkers. We hope that in Germany we're going to have more and more media companies who are going to join in the IFCN. Now, let's talk about the everyday madness, for example. Hopefully you can see it's a very long tail that we have. I'm going to tell you what you should see. This is a post. It's by Tobias Weihrauch, Bündnis 90, the Greens, for example. Tobias Reini said, until the next election, we have to do our best, and we have to let in as many Africans and Syrians into our country. And the crazy uncle in the WhatsApp group is going to climb up the walls. And there is a fact check on that. And the question, for example, is there a Tobias Weihrauch as a Green politician? No, he doesn't exist. Therefore, in the Facebook profile of Tobias Weihrauch of the Green, this is a fake, and the Greens say there is no member under this name. The next thing, for example, to do panicking, for example, you have, for example, toothpaste, which is like rat poison, full of rat poison. And many of them say that the measures of these ideologists who do fake news, for example, and also panicking, you would have to eat various tubes of toothpaste to get so much fluoride into your body that does any harm. Otherwise, the concentration is far too low. Let's have at more current topics, for example, that perhaps you have also seen it in your WhatsApp group or whatever. For example, here on the picture, you see Fritz Scholz, or Fritz von Scholz, for example, a German officer, for example, that he's the grandfather of the Chancellor of today. Is as the grandfather of Olaf Scholz, of Russia-friendly Telegram groups. If you look at them, for example, it's a colleague who also says that, for example, in the Federal Archive in Berlin, he did research on that, and they find out, no, Fritz von Scholz did not have any children. So Olaf Scholz is definitely not his grandson. And also the grandparents of Olaf Scholz, they were working in the trains in Hamburg. Or Christian Lindner, for example, Gerhard Lindner, for example, they say that he worked in the blockage in Leningrad, for example, and we checked it. It's not the case. The officer is not a relative of Christian Lindner. He was born in Wuppertal, and his grandparents, they had a bakery in Wuppertal. And you could say, yes, I mean, of course, each and every one has two grandparent parts, so to say, but the other ones were not called Lindner, so it's very easy to dismantle. So this is also like Jürgen Trittin, they said that he had Nazis in his family. No, it was simply lies, for example. It was simply wrong. And a last example before we come to our tools and the methods of how to work against it. Finally, stop treating bad our children. Let's look like a prison camp for children, but it's a primary school in Germany. So here you see also the crazy aunt, for example, primary schools in Germany. What do you do with kids in Germany? The fact check shows it's Spanish children who are being schooled in Madrid. And in Spain, there are very strict corona rules, even stricter than for us. And we're going to have a look at that with some tools where you can also dismantle it. Also as a non-journalist or non-professional, it's very easy to dismantle these fake pictures. Now let's have a look at the tools, for example. In DPA, for example, apart from many other tools that we have to the left, I try to put in some methods, for example, and that's logical thinking, which is not surprising. That helps a lot, logical thinking, to look at the content. If you look at a picture, for example, to think about it also without already becoming angry, that helps a lot with picture or video analysis, sometimes like shadowing. I don't know whether we have some time, then I'm going to show you a bit more about shadowing, which is quite interesting, and also to show synthetic media and deepfakes, and also the photo reverse search, geolocation to find locations that are shown, and the Internet Archive and frame by frame to show, for example, how individual pictures are shown to, for example, see shadowing. Now, let's have another look at this picture. For example, what happens here? What do we see here? We see indeed, for example, the kids have a school uniform in white. The girls have blue pullovers, for example, whether it's a school uniform. We don't have them so often in Germany, but they say that this is in Germany, and we have a concrete 4, for example. So you see a forest in the background. It does not seem to be a primary school in Germany, but where is it? So you can now use the backward or reverse search, and that's called search by image. It's an add-on. Perhaps you know these add-ons, for example, as ad blockers, for example. Search by image is free of cost. You can install it in Chrome or Firefox. This is how it looks like. So once you have installed this add-on, then you can take a picture, for example, click on the right mouse, and I'm going to show you the video, for example. Here you have the add-on, then you click on all search engines, and then you see various search engine reverse searches, and you can search for this picture. And here in Google, for example, you find an article from Maldita. These are Spanish fact checkers who have found out that it's a primary school in Madrid. So various search engines open up, and the picture is then compared to millions of pictures stored on the search engines, and they have said, of course, this is not enough. We have to check it by ourselves. So this is the name of the primary school. And here we have geolocation, for example. So we enter this name in Google Maps, and we find this view. And perhaps you might remember, if we compare it, to the left you have Google Maps, the school that it shall be, and to the right, the primary school in Germany, as it was called on the fake news. We don't have so much time, but I think you can see it. We have concrete with markings that are quite identical. And we also have this roof, for example, which is quite eye-catching. Then we have the park with all the trees in the background, and we have this duality of landmarks. And it's very clear that it's this schoolyard in Madrid that we are talking about, and also even the shadow is equal, the same. So with these examples, we can say that we are talking about that school. absolutely not in Germany, but in Madrid. Now, let's have a look at the second tool, which is also very important for us. The internet archives. Internet archives are also very important. It's to find the most important things, to delete the less important ones. Look at internet archives. It's very helpful for me. It's as fantastic as Wikipedia. And here is one practical example that you might remember some weeks ago. For example, it was, for example, Kliman. I don't know about him so much, but it was about the oder so, for example, clothing label. So it said, since oder so Foundation in 2018, we mainly produce in Europe. Was it always like that on the website, or was there something else some months ago? So we take the URL, for example, the website, for example, we pack it into the Wayback machine, web.archive.org, and there we have only 700 billion of websites that are archived there. Then we see on the 5th of February, for example, you can see then since oder so, we exclusively let produce in Europe. So we look at that, and let's have a look in the past. For example, in June, for example, it was said mainly in ZDF Magazine Royal by it was Finn Kliman, and which they were said exclusively. So with this tool, we can prove it, for example, how this is made up. So exclusively in Europe. So something has been changed on the website. Why? We don't know. But with the Internet Archive, we can prove it very easily. That's a very important tool for us. This video, perhaps you have seen, or you might see it. For example, you can see some of the dead peoples. Look at the fake Betty pountings. One of them is still having its last cigarette, for example. It says that don't believe that there are dead guys in Ukraine. This video also has been shown, for example, the corona fatalities, for example, they had to have a cigarette. I mean, it's a typically wrong context, for example, if you go with the reverse search of pictures, for example, you see that this is TikTok, for example, or Knock Design, and in reality, it's a music video for the Russian rapper Husky that has been published 1 year ago. It has nothing to do with Ukraine or Corona or something like that. It was simply a music video, and then some fatalities and dead bodies are put beyond that. And also to Italy, for example, where the idiots live in the promised land, for example. It looks like many ships come full of people, but if you look at it more precisely, and this is the image analysis that you see, that really try to look at things in details. You can see someone who has a safety vest, for example, and there and there and there you have some safety vests, for example, and here you have someone with a shirt when black and white rings, for example, and some people have hands on the boat. And here you see, I don't know with which tool or Photoshop this has been. So it has been manipulated to make things much more dramatic as they are. And my last example here, for example, in Karachi, for example, where a plane broke down in 2020, for example, and then this picture came up of this plane crash in Karachi in May 2020, for example. So the question really comes up if we look at the picture, for example, who has made this picture? The pilot in the machine, for example, who is there when he's landing, or the 800-meter high radar tower. And this makes it very clearly from, and you will probably know, this comes from a flight simulation games, and they are getting better and better. And also in the Ukraine war, for example, you have contents and focus videos, for example, from war games, for example, that are, and here the picture was from a flight simulator. This is where you see the machine with 2 burning engines, which is very rare. And the Metro Golden Mayer Lion, for example, that how did you get it through the hole? Was it like this or like that? So this is also very easy to dismantle. So someone had to go into tomography, for example. The last point is, as I said, the Fact Check 22 are projects that we do together with the Google News initiative that we have started and that we are continuing this year. It's all about digital research about verification fact checks. We have 2-day basic courses. We have in-depth training, and we have the fact check club of Slack with roughly 900 colleagues, and we have a digital learning platform that we call DPA Factify with explanatory videos, handouts, and quizzes. And we have done that with a lot of media companies in Germany. Our objective is to do more fact checks, and also my appeal to each and every one. I don't know whether some journalists are listening in. I hope so. We need more fact checks, and mainly in the regions. This is very important, not only in Berlin and the big RKI, for example, but we also need on the regional and local level. We have some very good first examples, for example, of the Main Post, for example. We are working together here. We have the Sächsische, for example, in the Eastern Westphalia, fact checks concerning logistics centers. Then we have MOZ, for example, whether more sports people are collapsing since there was a vaccination. Then, for example, whether you become infertile due to vaccination, for example. So also in Mindelheim. So these are all local news. The Ostfriesen Zeitung has done it. Klaus is also there, and Klaus writes a lot also about the Reichsbürger in Ostfriesland and also other people, how they think there. It's quite worrying, but also they are existing. And finally, do the Osnabrücker grains want to rent out one-family houses? No, they don't want to do that. Want to say that they are going to prohibit them. No, they are not going to prohibit one-family houses, for example. Now, we need local answers for the people locally. We don't want to let them confused. We want to give them answers, and DPA with its big team is also there, and it's supporting also editing in Germany to have more fact checks, also to actively fight against false and fake news. And now some ads are cooperation with WhatsApp. If something is not right, please ask us on WhatsApp. If you see in your WhatsApp group something which is suspicious, please get in touch with us in the WhatsApp group and the colleagues in our team. We'll be happy to answer your questions. Now, it's 016034764009. Thanks for listening in. That was all. I don't know, Katrin, whether you have questions.
Vielen Dank. Ein paar Minuten haben wir noch.
Thanks. Yeah, we have a few minutes left. I think we have like 2 minutes left. And I see the first question. Please raise your hands and someone is going to come with a microphone to you.
Jetzt bin ich gespannt.
Okay, I'm looking forward to your questions.
Ihr müsst mir das irgendwie übertragen.
Ach so. Soll ich schon?
Shall I? Can I? Oh, technology. Okay. Okay, let's just ask, and I will try to transmit it. I would like to know, for example, whether you've also looked up how the fact checks are perceived, whether the people say, okay, do I believe them or not? So the question is, okay, I hope that you can hear me. Okay, the question is, how are they perceived, the fact checks? It's always hard to say because many people delete their content once we have checked them because they are ashamed or whatever. This is something we are testing at the moment. So who have tried to hide away, for example, those who have hidden away underground, it's very hard to convince them. And then it's not about facts, but we know that also each and every one, for example, who has people in the family who feels insecure, for example, and from there we get many reactions. Many people say thanks for the information and enlightening me, who are not completely stupefied. But it's not the case that each and every one, that the Olaf von Scholz Nazi grandparents, for example, that they all say, oh, thank you, we didn't know that. No, that's quite rare. Okay, I'm listening for the next question.
Okay, sehr gut. Zweite Frage.
Okay, great. The second question, which is similar, for example, the question to the answer, how people react to fact checks, for example, but how do companies react to that? Have you seen how well the fact checks work as small disclaimers, for example? Are there corporations, for example, with Facebook and other companies, how it might be spread on a larger level, for example? What's the state of the art? Talking about companies, I think it's media companies that you talk about. about. Thanks for this question. What about the media companies? From our customers, from the media companies who do fact checks, cost quite a lot. If it's regional topics, for example, it works very well when they talk about happening in Osnabrück, if something that is spread in Bautzen or Hindelheim or Osnabrück concerning Facebook, for example, of course, and Google and Facebook, they're also interested in fact checks to really solve problems and get rid of fake news, and they don't want to take part of fake news. They still have a lot of work to do. That works very well, but for them, the fact checks, for example, it's quite an intensive format. You have to research a lot and you have to work out a lot on it, but they see that it's really worth it. Well, unfortunately, we have to stop here, but I think it was super interesting, and I hope you also like this contribution. A big applause for Stefan Voß.